Greetings and welcome back to, that's right, you guessed it, one of your favorite podcasts. At least I hope so anyway. I am one of your people in charge today. I don't think I'm the captain. I'll settle for XO. This is Future Imperfect, only on ThisWeekinGeek.net and our friends over at GeekCastRadio.com. I'm, of course, Mike the Birdman, but I'm not alone as I trek across the stars in this episode of Future Imperfect, where we're going to be taking a look at Star Trek The Next Generation Season 2 and our picks. I'm joined by one of my favorite people, my best friend, the guy who kept the site running while I was gone.
Alex, I was gonna say something funny, but I couldn't think of anything, and I couldn't think of any funny characters from my episode to talk about either.
And then, of course, as we often do with Future Imperfect, we're joined by our good friend over at the Geekcast Radio Network,
Steve Megatron.
And then finally, the last member of the Twig crew, the guy who keeps us rooted in science, understanding, and he's just a damn funny guy to have on the show. The guy from Earth vs. Soup,
Aaron Pollyea. How's it going, everybody?
It is fantastic to be back. I'm glad to be talking Star Trek again with you wonderful people, because I do find when I do watch Star Trek, I get more excited when I'm able to talk about it with people who understand it, who get it. In Aaron's case, he writes it for a living. So
it depends on the Trek, is what you're saying, though, too.
Yeah, it also depends on the Trek, because sometimes I get angry and we get Discovery Season 2, or Season 3, rather. But sometimes I get pleasantly surprised with Star Trek Lower Decks. Season 2 comes out next month, so looking forward to that.
Yeah, and the other cartoon's coming out sometime in the fall, I think, right?
Yeah, Prodigy premieres before the end of the year. I'm 90% sure. The first teaser trailer's out now.
So fingers crossed some decent Trek is coming in the form of cartoons.
Yeah, so we'll have to wait and see. But as I said off the top of the show, we're going to continue our watch through of the Star Trek The Next Generation series. But what we're doing is each season we get to pick one episode apiece, and it cannot be one that's talked about all the time. Like, for example,
if there's a super duper famous episode, like for season 1, we said Encounter at Farpoint is out because it's the pilot and everybody talks about it. For season 2, I was like, let's continue that forward, and we're not going to do Measure of a Man because everybody knows that episode. It's drilled into us, and so forth. With season 3, we won't do Best of Both Worlds Part 1. For season 4, the second part, and we won't do. Is season 4 have unification, or is that 5?
Oh man,
I think it's 4.
I think it's 4 into 5.
Yeah.
And you say that people are, have had Measure of a Man drilled into them, but judging by Picard season 1, I don't think they've actually understood what it was trying to say.
You see, I should clarify. Trek fans. I'm not convinced anybody that writes for Discovery is a Trek fan. So that's the general ideas, and it doesn't have to be an episode. Unlike a lot of other people are like, these are the best episodes. These are our personal favorite,
or ones that we've never seen before.
Yeah, and it can be one that is either not well received or considered a bad one. But if it means something to you, that's cool too.
Mm-hmm. So we are going to kick things off with Aaron's pick. And Aaron, take it away.
Okay, well, my pick is something that means something a lot to me, but I also think that it's well regarded, and it's Elementary Dear Data. And most people know this as the first Sherlock Holmes episode. But to me, it's the first episode that shows truly what computers are capable of in the next gen. And it has informed not only other writers of Star Trek through the years, like writing for Voyager with the EMH, or with me personally writing some of the adventures that I have for Star Trek Adventures. Knowing that a computer can generate an artificial intelligence, a sentient, self-aware being, is stunning. And it makes you really consider a lot of the other stuff that's happening in the background of the Star Trek universe. But let's get into the actual episode, and I'm going to try to be very brief with this. Basically, Data has an idea of having an adventure on the holodeck with Geordi, and he is going to play Sherlock Holmes, and Geordi is going to be Dr. Watson. And Data has read all of the Sherlock Holmes adventures, as you should, as I have, and he goes into the holodeck and immediately solves the adventure. And Geordi gets pretty ticked off because that's not what the holodeck is all about. Dr. Pulaski gets involved with a bet that says Data really isn't a person because he can't think outside of what has already happened previously. He can't like anticipate. So they go into the holodeck again, this time with Pulaski there, and they have the computer randomly generate a Holmesian style story, but the computer generates all these little story elements from other Holmes stories, and Data is able to put the pieces together and immediately solve it. And Pulaski gets pretty ticked off with that and says, "You're a cheat. You're a fraud." And then Geordi tells the computer to create a antagonist that is capable of defeating Data.
Big mistake.
And the computer takes this literally and generates an artificial intelligence, a sentient, self-aware being in the character of Moriarty. Moriarty is an evil genius, but as he is suddenly self-aware and able to realize that he's in an artificial environment, he's able to actually witness that the characters leave the holodeck. He's able to actually start influencing the ship itself through his will. This is an episode where we also see matter that was made on the holodeck leave the holodeck, i.e. one of Moriarty's drawings of Enterprise. It means that the ship is able to actually just create matter and through replication, and it's not just holograms. It also showcases the fact that obviously the computer can just make these beings. The episode wraps up with Picard convincing Moriarty to let the ship go and let Pulaski go, because he shouldn't basically just be this evil person. He should rise above it all. And Moriarty's scared. He doesn't want to die when the program gets shut off, because it would be like you just having your consciousness switched off. And Picard has him saved to the computer databanks and says, "You're not going to die. You're going to exist inside the computer, and we'll revisit your self-awareness later and computer end program." So the whole episode seems to be kind of an adventure rescuing Pulaski, but it's also another commentary on artificial life. Just like just like Measure of a Man, Elementary Dear Data deals with this idea of artificial life.
The thing that kind of makes me think about this, it's its take on mortality, as you just mentioned, with Moriarty expressing, "I don't want to die," that ties into the big goodbye from season 1, where Picard is getting ready to leave the program and he's talking to the police officer and he's like, "Dix, when you leave, what happens to me? Will I still have my family to go home to? Will I still have a wife who loves me?" And Picard can't answer him. And seeing Moriarty basically realizing, hey, like you said, when the switch gets flipped, there's nothing left. I find early Trek, when it got a chance to play with these morality ideas and philosophical ideas, that's when it's at its best. Not big fighting the Borg or the Romulans or the Klingon Civil War or whatever. This is the type of shit that I really dig. These things that really get you thinking later, because one of my biggest fears in real life is, when I die, will my consciousness cease to exist? And I've been through a number of surgeries in the last couple of years. And when I go under anesthetic and I've got the mask on and they inject the stuff into my veins to knock me out, I always wonder, just before I go, well, the last thing I'm going to see is this ceiling and this ugly ass nurse and these goofy looking scrubs. Well, that's not very cool.
And that's what they're trying to tap into, right? The universal human questions. And like, this is early Trek. While some people may say is a little more boring, what it does though is it provides the family's sitting there. There's the conversation starter, whether you like it or not.
And see, the other thing I think this raises is the ethics of simulation. When your computer is able to sufficiently simulate a accurate representation of a human being, in its desires, in its wants, in its drives, is it ethical to play God with that simulation? Because that is effectively a human being. And it raises some really sticky ethical concerns. And I don't think they really cover it very well in this episode. But let's be frank, the holodeck can be used for sex.
Yeah.
Is that legitimate? Is that an ethical use of the holodeck when the beings that are created in there are just as real as and have the opportunity and have the capability of being just as self-aware and just as intelligent as you are?
Well, it's like when Barclay had his holo addiction when he first shows up, and he's in the holodeck, belittling the senior crew and then making the female officers swoon over him.
Yeah.
Becoming the
It was
king
super
in your own
creepy.
mind. Yeah.
But
And-
like, this is why that this episode really resonates with me. There are so many interesting questions that pop out of it while watching it, and it's given me ample chances to write interesting things that have stemmed from this.
One of the things I noticed about this while I was watching your episode today, Aaron, is Pulaski. First off, I like the actress. I really do. When you give her something to chew on, she's great. But the character's written like shit. And the way she says to Data, you can't do this. She's a racist.
Yeah, but here's the thing. She's the stand-in. Her feelings about Data are the feelings that everybody else has for the hologram characters.
But she's always like
parallel.
that
Yes,
towards
yes,
Data.
yes, she is. And she never really changes. I mean, she does seemingly change by the end of the season when she leaves, because at least she gives grudging respect to Data. But I don't think she ever really grows to understand that Data is a person just as much as she is.
Yeah, that always sat wrong with me because, like, the idea of Star Trek in my mind is diversity, accepting others despite you look different than me, but we can still cooperate and work together. We can still do all these wonderful things. But
Did they try to just make her like Bones, but even more crotchety?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, there's just something about that, about her, the way she was written, that I never liked. And I'm a Pulaski defender. I like her when she can do something, and just don't be crotchety old bitch. Be a person, for lack of a better word. Be a friggin' person to Data, because that guy is nothing but cordial. He's nice to you. He's genuine. He's loyal. He's the guy you want at your back, because look how loyal he is to Geordi, how genuinely he questions people.
But she doesn't even view him as like she doesn't even view him as good as she views like a dog
or a tricorder. She looks at him like a tricorder.
Yeah, she would treat his pet, like his cat, better than she would treat him.
Yeah, well, remember that she misspeaks his name purposely all the time, and it says Data. Your name is Data, and he's like, no, my name is Data. Well, what's the difference? One is my name, one is not. It's that she sees him as an object.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And she's frustrated and mad that he would dare to think otherwise.
Yeah, but you see her bias also coming across with her interactions with Moriarty, that she honestly can't even imagine the fact that this guy really is self-aware. She just continues to play the part of like a 19th century woman that has been kidnapped for the longest time in this episode, just kind of playing along with the original holodeck.
Her superiority complex shows.
Yeah.
So that is Aaron's pick, and that is Elementary Dear Data. It's in the first couple episodes of season 2. We're going to move on to Steve now, who's picked one of the more popular episodes in Star Trek and definitely pushes the lore forward in what should have been a one-off bad guy turned into something a whole hell of a lot more. Steve, take it away.
So I picked the episode Q Who, and it, in a lot of ways, left a lot more questions than answers. It was meant to be, as you said, kind of a throwaway villain, just villain of the week thing, and they ended up recycling it the very next season for the Locutus arc, the best of both worlds. But it threw some other things in there, and that other thing is Q. And, whenever Q shows up on the Enterprise, it's always fun and games. Although in season 1, he was less about fun and games. He was more of just testing them and just being an irritant. And as the seasons progressed, he becomes more of this kind of plucky trickster that's helping them and guiding them along the way. Whereas here,
season 1, he was just an asshole. Later on, he's just like your dick uncle.
Yeah. Whereas like later, he's more like that Trelane character in the original series.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of, for his own amusement, but he's got an ulterior motive, to help to some degree, but he wants to see you struggle. So here is kind of no different. He offers his services to Picard, and Picard, in typical Picard fashion, at least in the beginning, is like, "Bite me, Q. Get off my ship.
We passed your test. Now go away. We're prepared for anything."
Yes, and he's just being
another
cocky.
Big mistake.
Yeah, he's being cocky, and he's like, "Oh, little here, human," and then sends him to across the galaxy. And Guinan's like, "If I were you, I would turn around and head back." And then the illusion of her species, because you really don't know much about Guinan's species either.
Was she introduced up to this point, or was this the first big showcase of her?
This is the more where she talks about her past a little bit, but we never learn more. Truthfully, until Generations, we know more about her.
Yeah, you learn that she's been to Earth a couple times, during Mark Twain's time and Samuel Clemens and everything. But
season 6 and 7 or something.
Yeah,
she was in the first episode of season 2.
But you learned how in season 6 and 7 how she met Picard originally, which was in that time period. But yeah. You get this weird dynamic between Guinan and Q, and Q's like, "What do you have that thing doing on your ship? She's an imp." And
she's not what she appears to be. And then what I loved is even as a kid, I was like, why does she make her hands like cat claws?
Yeah, I'm like, what is she gonna do? Like electrocute him like the Emperor?
Yeah.
and I was kind of waiting for it, and then nothing happened, and Q's like cowering behind Picard.
Well, that's the scary thing. I don't think they ever elaborate on that. It's just the idea that Q, first of all, she could sense Q was there, number one. Number two, Q couldn't sense she was there.
Yeah.
Which might be, even if Guinan doesn't have any power, per se, the idea that maybe their species has found a way to elude the Q in general is probably what scared him.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, and in the fact that you really don't get. I mean, you get Tully and Soren in Generations that says we're a race of listeners, and we're, we have, they say they have long life expectancies and everything, but there's really no payoff to this Q Guinan confrontation. Although I think they're going to do that in Picard season 2.
Oh,
because
don't start.
No, I'm not trying to go that way. I'm just saying they have John Delancey, they have Whoopi Goldberg. I think they're going to do it. Plus, Guinan's probably going to be their moral compass in that, because she can detect time travel, differences, like she's done in various episodes in TNG. But
people forget how big of a get it was to have Whoopi on there. She was at the peak of her career, her movies were making like $100 million at that point.
And she loved being on TNG.
Yeah. So, I mean, this would have been right around the time, was it Sister Act 1 came out?
Yeah.
And she's become like a big box office attraction. So
and she's on television.
What year was this?
89, I think.
Sister Act didn't come out till the 90s. This would have been Jumpin' Jack Flash and stuff like that. She was still doing a lot of stand-up.
Yeah, Sister Act came out in 92. This came out in 89.
Okay, so it's right at her ascension.
Yeah, this is her. She's on all the talk shows. She's doing a lot of stand-up. She's doing any movie she wants. And she came on this little television show because she
didn't she request to be on it?
I think so.
Oh, she wanted to be on it. It was LeVar Burton that got her on there.
And she had been a fan of Star Trek since she was a kid.
Yeah.
So this might have been the first time where we heard that this nerdy little show ended up being an in-demand thing with actors vying for roles.
And it's kind of funny because if you watch through TNG, you'll see actors that have become huge after playing this little bit part on the show at some point.
Oh yeah.
But no, it's interesting because Picard, after shooing off Q and Q, shuttling him off to to where the Borg happened to be at.
He snaps his fingers and they spin like a spinning top.
Oh, I know, and it was hilarious. They sent him to System J25, and Guinan's just like, head back, and he's like, I think I want to explore it.
And they're like, head back, and they're like, how fast can we get back? And it's like years.
Yeah,
years to like the furthest base star base away.
And then you get this cube that just comes into view, and they're like, what is this? And they're like, hey, there's something going on in engineering. And they all just stand there and look at him, and Picard tells Worf, take care of it. And Worf is like pointing at his security guys, hey, you do it. Let him get thrown first, and then I'll go after him. But I thought it was kind of interesting that they showed him pulling
moment.
Yeah. They show him pulling the pieces off of the dead Borg on the ground after he's stunned to the ground, and then still continues what he's doing, and then teleports away, and then they have to get in a fight, and they're not able to outrun this cube at all.
and then wasn't the cube originally like pieces of model kits, all the little bits and pieces glued together?
Yeah.
Which,
it's just
brilliant way to do it, right? Like, it's in today's day and age, they would try to, like, if they were to do a model, they would do it on a computer and then like try to 3D print it, and they were just like, grab a bunch of model kits and glue it all together,
which is kind of brilliant. But they had to be ingenuitive. They didn't have copy paste CGI.
Exactly. And it would have taken a long time to draw that out on a and then have somebody like sculpt it.
Oh, I know. So they're just like, just glue it.
Because like as a kid, before I knew that it was a model kit, my thought was, oh, they must have grabbed like a giant square piece of foam and then slowly cut out all the intricate pieces and then painted it. And then it's like, no, we don't have the money for that.
At least the cube that was in First Contact, though, it was made with tons of metal piping. It's actually a pretty big miniature, but it was a miniature. It wasn't CGI. I got to see it at an exhibit in Detroit.
Yeah,
oh, nice.
I saw that, I believe, too. At they had the Star Trek thing at the Henry Ford Museum a few years back.
Yep, that's the one I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yep, I went and saw that, and I don't know. I love the fact that they made models of this stuff. Like, there's so much intricate detail that they can do with that somehow gets snubbed over when they turn it to CGI.
Well, and the expensive part now is doing the proper. You hear about ray trace lighting in games. Well, movies have done it now for years, but it's super expensive. Whereas when you build a model and you just shine a light on it, it does all the light refractions the way it's supposed to because it's real.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So it ultimately costs a bit to make the model, but then it's cheaper to shoot in the long run.
Well, yeah, because you can continue to reuse the same model.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was interesting because at this point, every alien ship we had seen had mostly been, something that resembled a ship as we know it, right?
Yeah.
Or had been like some sort of probe or a satellite, and
or
this
a
was the first
carryover
time
from the original series.
Yeah. Whereas the freaky thing is everything is so sleek and smooth looking, in Star Trek, and here we see something that looks like it was made out of sewer pipes. And it's a basic geometric shape, and you're like, what the hell is that?
And it's just freaky. Between the music, between the tone, like it's creepy as all get up. And I just love when Q comes up to Picard and says, you can't outrun them. You can't destroy them. If you damage them, the essence of what they are remains. They regenerate and keep coming. Eventually you will weaken. Your reserves will be gone. They are relentless.
And Guinan saying, you can't reason with them. Well, at least not yet. I don't know anybody that ever has. Nobody has. And they're like, well, it's like, no, like, don't. You can't.
Yeah. And then Q, Picard has to finally just do it as they're getting more freaked out by this, and it's begging Q, I need you. And then Q flings them back. And
flings them back, but all the crew that died is still dead.
Yeah.
He didn't bring them back. He didn't rewind time or anything. And they're like, all the crew's dead. And he's like, well, you had to learn a lesson.
Yeah. There's a line around this interaction where they talk about sometimes a lesson has to be a bloody nose. And Q
Yeah.
says something to Picard along the lines
He's
of,
like, if you can't take a bloody nose, you should just stay home.
yeah. And he's like, there are some wonders that the human mind cannot comprehend, but there's also terrors out here that'll freeze your soul. So if you're going to explore, be ready for it.
Well,
And
and Guinan says, since they are aware of your existence, they will be coming. And
Yeah, because
she
they
says,
scan the
you
ship.
can bet on it.
They scan the ship. They'll know where Earth is.
Yeah.
And we end up getting the real payoff season. Well, a little bit of season 2, and then the real main payoff is the movie. When we get the movie, it's like, oh, their fleet is here.
Yeah. Except they're more ready during first contact, only because the Enterprise shows up.
Yeah,
And Picard has inside knowledge and knows how to destroy them, but it was all a ruse anyway.
Yeah, I mean, for the sake of the movie, like the movie still had a fairly limited budget, in that we weren't going to see, like 150 Borg cubes show up on screen. But what we got was satisfying enough that they actually did the proper payoff for it. But there is the other aspect that some of the lore gets changed later on when they show the babies in the incubators.
Yeah, that's just weird.
Which
I can explain that.
Can I guess before you
Sure.
school me in your knowledge?
Sure.
My guess, looking at it, how it could be retconned or explained, is they assume that this is how they're born, and they add the enhancements later on. When the reality would be, oh, these are just literally babies that were captured and assimilated. And, because there's no real hard evidence they have to go on that this is how they're born.
Yes, that the assimilating the babies that were just captured, that is part of it. But it's also genetic manipulation of the drones that they have, of the material that they have. And let's see if we can get something new, unique biologically out of this.
Oh, that's creepy.
So like, hey, let's be honest, drones that are assimilated, do you need your gonads anymore? No, but they're probably in a freaking file somewhere, and they're just going, whatever like medical Borg that are there are going to keep tinkering with sperm and ova that are around to try and make the ultimate whatever.
That's very Boys from Brazil creepy.
yeah, like
Where the Borg Queen keeps coming from.
Yeah,
They keep hatching another one.
pretty much.
There's a lot about this episode that sets up Star Trek right in through Picard, where the Borg are this huge threat. Although they haven't really addressed, even with the artifact in Picard season 1, they don't really tell us what happened after Voyager. Just, hey, we found a cube, now we're gonna hang out here and live and fuck here.
Well, like their idea was like, you killed the last queen, but it's like, how do we know? So how do we know? Well, it's like, we killed the one that came into the Alpha Quadrant, and then you killed the one that was in
The Delta.
the Delta Quadrant. Why wouldn't there? Why couldn't there be, I don't know, a couple more? Or
And,
why
and
would?
as the Queen even said, you think so 3-dimensionally. Like,
yeah,
it doesn't matter if you kill the Queen. The Queen exists anyway in the collective, and probably actually exists outside of space-time.
Yeah. So for all we know, they blow it up, transwarp conduit, yada yada yada, and bam, somewhere in the Gamma Quadrant, there's an incubator.
or honestly, the Borg are so powerful with their transwarp shit. You're telling me there's not at least a Borg colony in the Andromeda galaxy?
Yeah,
I
they might
wouldn't
be
surprised.
like that's the thing. Like, maybe they're just not even in the Milky Way.
It's possible. But I doubt that they would actually be in Andromeda. There's bigger, nastier things in Andromeda from the original series that are mentioned.
So, but again,
yeah.
we're also sort of thinking, what would they probably do with Picard? They're not going to remember the original series. The only people that might remember the original series are maybe Anson Mount and other actors on the new shows.
Well, if
Not
they
the
remember
writing team.
Voyager enough to actually put in that transporter that can go 30,000 light years or whatever,
Oh yeah.
they should have assimilated everybody by now by beaming drones randomly to M-class planets.
That's
that
a
would
good
take,
idea.
That's too much logic.
You wouldn't even have to beam drones. You would beam freaking loose nanites and just spread it through the atmosphere.
I mean, speaking of that, I don't know if that's a good. We'll talk about something like that later on with Mike, because there's a technology there that could have been used. But my final thoughts, at least on this episode, are, it sets up what, for better or worse, what was to be the most important enemy of 2 series, maybe even the whole franchise.
Yeah, basically, they wanted something cooler than the Klingons, because that's what everybody associates with Star Trek. Something that can beat you up, that isn't a Romulan,
Something
and isn't
that
just
wasn't
random shit on your face.
Something that wasn't tied to like ancient history or tied into the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
An enemy that was, outside of the realm of our own. I almost wonder, like, was Roddenberry still alive in season 2?
Yeah.
Should have been.
I was going to say, is this is this a bad guy he would have been okay with? Because it seemed like everything he wanted was to have its roots.
Well, they
in
kind of
reality.
started pushing him out the door. So it's not really surprising that things just kind of started changing. Plus, I believe at this time his health was getting weaker, and by like 91 he died.
Yeah, so I can see that. I mean, should I go into my episode then?
Yeah.
Okay, so I will preface this by saying my favorite Trek episodes, outside of the ones that have long arcs that go on and so on, I love when Star Trek can be a little more like Outer Limits or a little more like the Twilight Zone. I am the fan of... I love the episodes where they do the holodeck stuff, but I like episodes where there is a quirky mystery or something really out there. So I picked the Royale. My honorable mention will be, what was it called? A Matter of Honor or whatever. It's got honor in the title. That was the episode I was thinking of picking, because that's the one where Riker goes on to the Klingon ship and then becomes part of their crew for like an exchange program.
Yeah, Matter of Honor. That's a really good one. Yeah,
and it's a good one, and just got some famous actors in it that I like, and it has the memorable line where the 2 women Klingons are staring at him, and the second in command on the ship's like they're trying to decide whether or not you'd be able to survive being with them, and then he's like, both, and cracks them all up. So it has its funny moments, and it's one of the few times where you see like a crew member actively maybe having to go to war with the Enterprise itself because they're duty bound based on where he's working. Cool episode, but my favorite episode of the season, partially because Pulaski's in it very little, is the Royale. The basic setup is they are scanning a planet, and they're like, "Oh, this is a terrible planet. There's tons of like neon and methane and terrible stuff in the atmosphere." But then they find an object in the orbit of the planet, and when they beam it on board, it ends up being the side of what appears to be like a NASA capsule or part of the shuttle. And they're like, "What?" Because this is not anywhere near Earth. And they scan it like, oh, it's somewhere in like the 2040s to 2070s, I think is when they say. They're like,
something like that. There's 52 stars on the flag, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, 52 stars. So I guess the assumption is at that point Puerto Rico has become a state, and who knows, maybe Canada or Guam or something. But they did mention that it was, when they did the research in the show, it's from the 3rd attempt for Earth to fly beyond its solar system pre-warp. So it predates, I guess, World War III.
Yeah, or it's during it.
Yeah, it's whatever the struggle. There are still nations struggling for power.
And I'm trying to pull up the exact date that they.
It's 2039 is when they say it's from.
See, World War III is kind of hazy when it's of when it takes place. One can say that it is ended by the time First Contact happens. It's been gone for a while, but let's say that's during World War III. It would have to be during World War III.
So it's an attempt, maybe to show superiority, or also it could have been an attempt to say, hey, if we destroy the planet, we need to be able to leave here and find a habitable planet. So I'm assuming it was not just a ship sent to find another, to leave the galaxy. It might have been a scouting out, where can we live sort of thing. So they then find a structure, and it looks sort of weird on their 3D model. But they're like, there's a bubble around it with breathable air, and they're like, that shouldn't exist. And they're like, well, let's do an away team, and they send off they send off a bunch of bridge crew, because of course that's a good idea. But I guess that's sort of Star Trek in a nutshell, right? You have Riker, you have Data, and you have Worf go down to the planet, and it's got this cool green screen effect for the late 80s where you can see the bubble encapsulating them, where above them is like the death mist, and then in front of them is just a black void and a revolving 1930s-esque door. And when they enter, bam, Twilight Zone episode starts, and Alex gets super into it, and they are in an amalgamation of like a 1940s style casino with a 1980s style casino. There's a bit of both in there in the way it's sort of mixed together, and that's partially because they probably didn't have the budget to make it really look like when the book would have been written. And they end up discovering that all of the people in there aren't really real, but they can still interact with them. Some people won't talk to them or acknowledge that they're there, but some do. There's also a really cheesy B plot happening, and at first glance you might go, oh god, it's a cheesy episode, but then you've realized as you go on that it's intentionally cheesy, because this entire world is based on a novel that was inside of the space shuttle that this alien had decided to recreate for a passenger of the spaceship, simply because they thought that was the idealized version of the planet that they came from. So it's based on the equivalent of like not like a good Raymond Chandler book, but like a really bad dime novel from the 40s or 50s. And they are sort of just enacting what happens in the book. So the only people they can interact with happen to be the people in the book that are named characters. And there's a plot going on of a love tryst and mobsters and so on. But to get there, they realize they can't leave. They're only able to communicate halfway through the episode when they find a way to penetrate the beam or sort of the force field that's protecting them. But they go up into the hotel room, find I can't remember his name now, but they find one of the passengers of the NASA spacecraft, and he died of old age. And that's where they find his book, and they find a journal entry basically saying he harbors no ill will, because whatever the alien, they came in contact with aliens, and there was some sort of germ or bug. They didn't kill them on purpose, but it was the equivalent of, hey, it's like if we were unvaccinated and you went over and got malaria somewhere. They got some sort of disease that killed them from the aliens. Only one of them survived, and they didn't know where he was from or anything, because he was like in a coma when they found him. And they basically recreated this from the book he had on him as a place for him to live out his days, maybe in hopes that somebody would find him, or it's not really explained. But that's where this whole mystery, how this came to be. It was sort of a sanctuary as a sorry, hey, sorry we killed your crew by accident. Here you can live, and maybe somebody will find you. Little do they know it's been a couple hundred years.
Mm-hmm.
I think he died, they said, like 240 years earlier or something.
Something like that, yeah.
And he died of old age. But the journal entry he only wrote one entry, was stating that, and then saying he has no ill will to them because he doesn't think that they did it out of malice, but that he welcomes death because he was living in this loop that he could not leave. He was from a time where they didn't have transport technology. So even if he left there, he would just be surrounded by a bubble that he couldn't leave. So they end up finding out the only way to get out, because they're stuck in the loop. It's the entire simulation follows the story of the book. So they find out, there's 3 foreign investors that are that end up buying the casino in the book. So they have to win a bunch of games. Data fixes a bunch of trick dice that were weighted dice to balance them out, and they win all the money. They, they're flamboyant, give a bunch of money back to the casino, and then they leave as the music starts to rise, and they sort of end the book. They leave, they get transported out, and then there's a little joke that Riker says, to Picard, something about how it was like, oh, I guess it was just business as usual up here, and closes it off. I mean, it's a lot of these early season episodes have a pretty abrupt ending. So it was a little quick, but they did have a few sort of guest stars that were decent in there, like a lot of character actors playing it out, and they're really hamming it up in the scenes that are from the novel, to the point where I think there's a part where Counselor Troy is listening to an audio version of the novel with Picard, and Picard's doing the classic head, holding his hands across his face in embarrassment, and she's just like, with your permission, sir, I'd like to leave. She just leaves because she can't listen to more of it. So that's this is the quintessential kind of episode that I like the most. Whether some people might say it's a guilty pleasure, but for me it's not a guilty pleasure, because I just unabashedly love all these ones where it's like, hey, it's Star Trek, but it's also like a Twilight Zone episode.
The thing I think that this episode stands out particularly, there are two reasons. Number one, I see a budgetary constraint, as you mentioned. This is what's known in television typically as a bottle episode. It takes place in one or two locations. That's it. Most of this episode takes place on the planet within the Royale place. You never find out what's causing it, just is. And
yeah, it's just that the aliens built it for him as a sort of sanctuary for him to recover and out of being sorry for him.
Yeah. So there's a part in this that I absolutely love, and it's where Data is working with Riker and Worf, and they're at the craps table. Now he's crushed the dice in his hand to change the weighting of them so they'll come up 7 consistently now. And he looks at Jonathan Frakes as Riker, and he says, well, Papa needs new shoes, or baby needs new shoes.
Yeah.
And the look that Riker shoots him, I wonder if that was Brent Spiner
ad-libbing.
Brent. Yeah, because there's so many great.
There's a few moments of like that in here when they go to use the turbo lift, in quotes, and Worf is like, it must be malfunctioning, and then Data's just like, push, and he pushes the button to go up.
There's another great moment, and this is, once again, Riker at his most Riker, and they're talking about how they have to bet everything and spread the wealth around, because how they get out of this is in the novel, quote unquote, foreign investors come. They have to raise $12.5 million, and Riker tells Data, bet it all. We have to be flamboyantly generous. And he's like, are you sure, sir? And he's like, oh, yeah. And it's just the way he smiles.
Well, there's the part where he's introduced to Texas, played by Noble Willingham, who was the only guest star that they said, like, they noted as a guest star. And I think if anybody recognizes him now, like, he was in a ton of stuff. Like, it was one of those, like, perennial TV movie actors. But where we would probably remember him from was he was like the boss in Walker, Texas Ranger for years. That's how I recognize him from that stupid show. But he's like a classic, poorly written Texas millionaire who happens to be there and befriends them. I think he gives Data his cowboy hat at one point.
Which, that is brilliant. I love Data in a cowboy hat.
He puts it on Data's head, and Data's like, what? But the other line that I think a lot of people remember from this is, again, the jokes are starting to come through a little better, a little more snide in here. When they find the body in the bed, and it's partially decomposed, and they say, oh, he died in his sleep. And as Worf is walking away, he goes, terrible way to die. So they're starting to put in, like, the logical humor in it for, it's like, oh, he didn't get to die as a warrior. He's died in his sleep of old age. What a terrible way to die. So there's that. And then there's a part where you want to talk about Riker smiling and having like so much fun, like whether it be, and it looks genuine, looked like it was genuinely fun, is when Noble Willingham comes in, introduces himself, and he goes full on, like, hamming it up Texan to Data, and like they brushes by him. He just has like a shit-eating grin from ear to ear that he's just having so much fun down there from scene to scene. So that really came across the screen. Like, this is a fun but also creepy and menacing episode in some aspects.
Adopted pets bring us comfort, joy, and unconditional love. But every year, over 100,000 dogs and cats in Canadian animal shelters are waiting to find their forever home. The Royale Home for Every Pet project is a way for you to help. When you buy $20 of Royale products, Royale will reward you with a $5 Royale coupon and donate $5 to participating animal shelters. Help find a home for every pet. Full details at royale.ca/pets.
Es la época del año en que no usar maquillaje está de moda. Y con Olay le darás a tu rostro ese brillo de verano. Primero exfolia tu piel con la crema limpiadora Olay Regenerist Cream Cleanser. Después aplica el hidratante Olay Retinol 24 Night Moisturizer en el frasco morado. Contiene ingredientes recomendados por dermatólogos como retinoides y péptidos para una piel más tersa y radiante. Recibe $2 de descuento en ambos productos. Encuéntralos en tu tienda más cercana y en olay.com.
I mean, overall, it's a fantastic episode, I think, as Alex does. It's worth a watch. If you want something kind of fun, Trekky, but not too Trekky,
it's one of the better ways to do a one-off.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to move on to my pick and the final episode we're going to talk about. And this episode is called Contagion. And Contagion, the TLDR is the Enterprise's sister ship called the Yamato is trapped in the neutral zone due to computer malfunctions that's crippled the ship. So they talk to the Enterprise and say, hey, can you come help us? We're trapped in the neutral zone. Picard knows this guy. Several other people know the captain of that ship. And they're like, hey, yeah, we'll go help you out. I mean, we're another Galaxy class. We're the most sophisticated piece of technology ever created.
Yeah, they said it's a sister ship. I think there's only 2 of them at this point, right?
No, there should be at least Galaxy, Enterprise, Yamato, and man, off the top of my head, now I know all my constitutions.
It's one of the first times I think we see another Galaxy, right?
Yeah, but there should be at least 3 right now.
Yeah, because there'll be the Galaxy, which is the prototype, the Yamato, and then the Enterprise.
And not only does he know the captain, like they're on a first name basis, so they really do know each other.
Mm-hmm. So they start downloading the logs from the Yamato before they get there. They're like, just in case, let's know what's happened to you so Data can take a look and we can see what's kind of going on. And then their ship, they're like, hey, Captain, things aren't looking too good over there. You're starting to lose magnetic containment. Do you want to start beaming people off just in case? And then the ship blows. 1,000 people dead right off the hop. And there's nothing they could do. And it starts getting tossed around just the way that the problem happened. They're like, is this a design flaw? Are we sitting on a bomb? And Geordi's like, well, yes and no. Yeah, this shouldn't happen. But he's like, at the same time, it could, and it could be very bad.
It could. Well, at first, I think Picard's like, it can't happen. And he's like, it can happen, but a very specific set of catastrophic failures have to happen.
Yeah. So they send Geordi to go read the owner's manual for the rest of the episode. And eventually he gets tossed around on the turbo lift, which is unintentionally funny.
Yes.
And he tells Captain Picard when they arrive at this planet, there's a probe coming, shoot it, don't let it scan us. And he's like, well, why? Because that thing is a weapon, we think. So it turns out when the Yamato blew up and they transmitted their logs, there was a computer virus or something hidden in the logs, and it's slowly rewriting the Enterprise's software. But because the Yamato was scanned, it infected every system at once, whereas the Enterprise's systems are slowly being compromised because it was only hidden in one file and it's slowly spreading.
Yeah, in the communications array versus everything getting hit. Also, again, inadvertently funny moment, or maybe purposeful. He gets blasted, falls backward, his visor comes off. They help him up, and first thing Picard says is, "Welcome to the bridge."
And then there's moments where they get down to the planet where Picard says, I'm leading the away team. And Riker's like, we have this conversation every time. No, you're not going. He's like, well, I'm an archaeologist. You're not. No, the Enterprise is yours. And then Riker sarcastically says, well, for as long as it lasts, yeah, sure. So they go down to the planet. The planet's been wiped out. There was this war with orbital bombardment like 200,000 years ago, and they find out where these things are coming from, but it doesn't look like it's a military command center. So they go in there, they start kind of playing with it. Data and Picard are able to figure out rudimentary language to get the computer up and going. And it turns out the Iconians, which is this huge technological civilization, may not have been wiped out. They may have just run to a different planet. And because they have this technology that allows them to go pretty much anywhere in the galaxy or universe, maybe. But the Romulans want this shit too because they follow the Enterprise.
Yeah, they don't know. Nobody knew what it was that they had at this point, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, crap. If the Romulans find this, this is bad because what they have is a technology that can open a doorway to anywhere they want, pinpoint anywhere in the entire galaxy, and you walk through and you're there.
Yeah. So
this was what I was going to say is like, can you imagine like what happens if the Borg got this technology?
Yep.
End of all civilization as we know it.
Within a matter of weeks, easily. So the Romulans are in the neutral zone investigating the explosion of the Yamato, and there's kind of a standoff between this sub-commander, insert name here, and Riker and Picard, and they're like, well, we need to find out what's going on so this doesn't happen to anybody else. Just give us some time. And she's like, no, leave or I'll kill you. And then her ship starts getting malfunctioned because they intercepted the logs from the Yamato as well. But so they arrive at the same planet as Picard. When they beam down, Riker calls over to that ship and says, if you see a probe, kill it. And the sub-commander was like, I don't believe you. You're bluffing. I'll kill you first. And he's like, no, seriously, please do it. And she listens to him, and then the ship decloaks, and then they just fuck off for a while. So,
their power keeps turning on and off.
Yeah.
Well, like the ships are awfully close together. I would be worried they're just going to like drift into each other at this point.
So they get on so when Picard is down on the planet trying to figure this out, Data gets hit by something and starts realizing his software is being overwritten too. And there's a point where you think he dies, where they get him back to the Enterprise.
At first he's like, I'm blind. I'm blind and my motor and you're like, crap, he's dead.
Yeah. And basically the episode ends where they kind of figure out they can stop more probes coming up from this planet by basically locking the doors as the probes launch, and then the backwash will kill everything in there. The problem is when Picard tells them this plan, he has to stay behind to activate the sequence, realizing he'll die. So he looks at the door thinking, well, I could get out of here at the very last second, but I don't know where I'm going.
Well, not realizing that O'Brien actually had a fix on him and was going to teleport him out.
Yeah. So the episode ends back on the Enterprise with Data being dead, but then he just reboots. And everyone's like, what the hell? He's like, oh yeah, I just flushed everything that was in active memory. So the episode boils down to literally every call you've ever made to Comcast, Roadrunner, or any piece of technology.
No, well, I will correct you slightly there because being somebody who worked in that field, it's not just turn it off and turn it back on.
Yeah, but that's the first solution everybody goes to first.
Yes, they did say he had to wipe any record of what happened currently. It's the equivalent of a high school remember the program called Deep Freeze?
Yep.
That was so kids couldn't install porn and crap onto the computers, where every time you rebooted the computer, it would take it to a state that was locked specifically to that. And you can only install, you can install an update all you want. You could put games on anything. The second you reboot the computer, it would automatically revert to a secured state. That's what they had to do to the ship. Yeah. Turn the power off and then reboot it to a previous save state.
I wonder if this is where people got the idea for Max Time Machine or similar software.
Well, I mean, that's Time Machine. That's what it is. Yeah. That's what Windows System Restore is. It's the same. The only difference is it used to be that Deep Freeze and software like that was only for corporations and schools and stuff where they had like 1,000 computers to deploy it to. Well, here's the funny thing is I wouldn't be surprised if that software was inspired by this episode because that software came out around like 95 or 96.
So all's
See, this
well
is
as
a
that
weird
end
one.
wells. Yeah.
It's a weird one. To me, it's one of the many examples of a Galaxy class blowing up from a warp core breach, because I think there's like 7 or 8 examples of the Enterprise D blowing up from warp core breaches in like alternate histories or whatever, in time loops.
Yeah, just wait till we get to parallels.
Oh yeah, it's insane. So like my ongoing gag is that Galaxy classes warp cores are like made with tinfoil and duct tape.
It's a crystal ball that's hollow.
Yeah, and it does seem like there was another Galaxy besides Galaxy, Enterprise, and Yamato at the time. It looks like Challenger was also launched.
Oh.
Okay. Maybe when they said sister, they meant that they were launched at the same time.
Yeah, that they actually, according to the TNG technical manual, that they actually had swapped systems between Enterprise and Yamato during construction. So they shared a lot of the same equipment.
Okay. So that would make sense. They're being built at the same time and christened at the same time or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I will mention one thing that I forgot to mention from my episode is just a little trivia fact. They mention Fermat's last theorem, which they said had not been solved for 800 years, but a proof was found 6 years after this episode aired. So it dates it a little bit, but it's also a neat little point where they're at the time they're like, here's a problem that hasn't been solved for hundreds of years, and then some brilliant person figured it out like 6 years after the show.
Well,
So-
who knows? It's an alternate timeline. That person wasn't born because of the eugenics wars or whatever.
So, what are some other thoughts about this episode before we start to kind of close things out? Like I said, I think this pushes the lore forward. And
It
does
was,
this-
yeah, it was one of the first episodes. I don't think it was it the first? But it was one of the first where Picard is on the away team without Riker, or he even leaves the ship.
I think it's a weird episode just because I do like the idea of like an information weapon, but having it be able to infiltrate other computer systems that are completely differently coded or would use a different, I don't want to say operating system, a different way of computation. Like it would be like using your Mac to hack a Babbage engine. Could you really do it?
Yeah, like you'd assume that if every bit of machine code, assembly, whatever, it boils down to zeros and ones, a pure binary language, we're going to assume that is what the Klingons and Romulans, that everything goes down to a binary system. Like the only way would be, well, quantum mechanics and quantum computing is not binary. There's also another state. So you could go there, but so the idea would be that this is so foreign to it that it's not even based on binary computing.
I would argue that is the case because duotronics is the step up from the computers that we have today. They go from transistors to duotronics in 2243, and it's never really clearly stated what duotronics is.
I guess quantum, the equivalent would be what we're doing now with quantum computing.
Yeah, it's probably quantum computing using quantum pairs. That's why it's called duotronics. Yeah. Using quantum pairs to do stuff, and then the stuff that's on TNG is actually a step beyond that, and it's called isolinear. And to me, that suggests there's some sort of molecular computing going on, using chains of molecules to store information and unravel to compute things.
So the idea would be that this would have to be so foreign that it's not even like they're using they're so alien and so foreign to it that it's not even like they're using that tech or binary or anything, any root technology that we've used. That it's just completely out there. Like, oh, this computerized technology uses some form of mathematics that we never discovered. And the fact that it's taking a long time for it to adapt to our technology would say that it's foreign enough, but not necessarily more advanced than what we have.
Or that the actual isolinear systems adapt to any intrusion as quickly.
Yeah, like the idea. Like I like the idea that they had this teleportation technology, but my thoughts are that yes, they're thousands of years old and they were the super advanced, species, but that maybe in reality we are more advanced now than they were. They just have a tech that, you know, we hadn't dealt with, which is why we weren't able to adapt right away, you know, and which would explain why a simple method of us just rebooting everything made it work and flushed it out.
I mean, these were the Iconians, right?
Yes.
That's who these were. I mean,
Yes.
the Iconians are iconic in Star Trek. They're referred to quite often as being one of like the elder races that just disappeared for some reason.
Yeah, like they're not the same race, the one that like seeded us, right? That was in that
different.
episode.
That's different completely.
But like the idea is like they're from an ancient, like a first wave of advanced peoples that their species died out.
I think it's like what 200,000 years ago or something.
Yeah.
Like that
So yes, like in our mind, like we've envisioned them as being some technological marvel, but we don't. For all we know, we've already surpassed them.
Yeah, it's very possible. Yeah.
They just happen to be advanced because the tech they developed was different than ours and allowed them instantaneous transportation through doorways. But because of that, would that also mean that they maybe never had to develop some of the tech that we did? Because they would just find a planet that was hospitable and walk through a door and they're there. They never had to work on spaceship tech.
I think that they did have spaceship tech, but it probably was, again, different.
Like maybe were the probes there to try to adapt, because it's trying to adapt technology that might have been more prevalent in their time. So was it a way for them to just like, hey, we're now in control of your ship?
You know what I just thought of?
Maybe they didn't need to have their own ships because they would use the probes to take over whatever ships were in the vicinity, and that's what they used to leave if they had to.
The doors is the Iconians' version of a Stargate.
Yeah, pretty much.
The Iconian gateways, that's what they're called.
Yeah. So I mean, I like it. I don't think that they really follow up on it.
They're mentioned quite a
bit. Like this particular doorway thing, right? Like,
no, I mean these gateways are mentioned quite a bit. I think there's even another episode that deals with the gateways at some point. Maybe I'm misremembering, but yeah, the gateways are dealt with, and in a lot of the obviously there's lots of side canon that deals with the Iconians, but yeah, the gateways are a thing. Like they're around. It's just that most of them are broken after 200,000 years.
And this is another episode that has, this is the one that aired previously, right before the episode I talked about. There's a lot of funny moments in here too with Data. Data and Geordi, when Geordi gets like electrocuted and Data has to throw him across the room. And like their banter back and forth is very, there's a lot of moments that make you smile in this, but it's not goofy. So I think they like, for season 2 is often remembered as like the crappy season, but I think a lot of that has to do, wasn't there a writer's strike at this time too?
Yeah, because the last episode of this season boils down to Medical Bay clip show.
Yeah, but that's not because of writer's strike. That's because of they went over budget for Elementary, My Dear Data, and another episode. They went way over budget.
But those are our picks and selections for Star Trek: The Next Generation Season 2. Hopefully you will check these out through your streaming service or your DVDs, Blu-rays, whatever you have to watch.
Yeah,
these.
I think in Canada, I think it's on Crave, right?
Crave and Netflix. That's where I watch it.
Crave and Netflix. I think it'll be Paramount Plus in the States. And I think it's either Amazon or Netflix internationally.
So these episodes are not hard to find. So the next time you hear the four of us will be in September, but you will hear the three of us, or at least two of us, talking about some other things as we move forward during the month of August, because Alex is going to take a well-deserved break as he took care of Twig while I was basically dying.
Yeah. Alex, can you host the show for 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks at the most?
Yeah. And then like, yeah, man, you almost died. I'm thinking, well, that's not very good news.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, 2 to 4 weeks. And that was in February. And you came back last week.
Yeah. Because it was weird. I thought I would have been out of like when I was admitted in March, I figured, oh man, this whole gallbladder thing is over with. My liver's looking healthy. And then the emergency room, and then surgery a month later. And then I just had surgery a couple of weeks ago to pull out my stent. and then I got to follow up with my doctor in a few weeks. So thankfully, Dr. Pulaski.
I said I'd like to take a couple weeks off in August, and Mike's like, "Why don't you take most of August off?"
Yeah, just
because I'll still have reviews, and I might pop up on an episode or two here, but I won't be doing the regular schedule stuff. Mike can do all that. You can deal with it now. It's your baby.
Yep, no problem. So we will be talking about different things about sci-fi, and then when we come back in September for back to school, as much as that's going to happen, we'll probably talk about our picture for season 3 and move forward throughout the year.
And as we said, the episode that won't be included is Best of Both Worlds.
Yes, so we will be doing that over the next little while. Me and Alex will be doing some more stuff in the next little bit. We're going to record some commentaries while he's on vacation so he can come and hang out because I'll be fully vaxxed by then. And then me and Aaron will be doing some loose cannons about some weirder movies you may have not heard of or different ideas. So it'll be fun. It's going to be different. That's mostly what I'm looking forward to.
It'll be fun. It'll be fun to sit down and talk with you again. It's been too long.
It really has been. So, guys, I want to thank each and every one of you who listens to the show across the various platforms, be it Spotify, iTunes, or wherever.
Yes, and we'll have more than one episode of this every 6 months with Steve because it's time we start recording more.
Yes. So look forward to all that and more in August and going forward until we take our next break, which will be after the 12th of December, where we take our usual twig break for a month because of the holidays. So until
and there won't be a break for Earth versus Soup.
No, there won't be a break for that. I've got a bunch of episodes to edit. They're also, even though we go on break, it just means that we're not doing anything live during that time. We'll have plenty of stuff to come out over the holidays.
Exactly. So don't worry about it. Twig has got you covered. So for the Spaceship Future Imperfect, we have been
Alex.
I'm Aaron Pollyea. I'm sorry, Steve.
And Steve.
And I've been Mike the Birdman saying, live long and prosper.
Download the Booster Juice app today and
skip the line.
Get limited time offers and promotions.
Order Booster Juice from anywhere.
Get the Booster Juice app now.
Anytime is a perfect time to get into a new routine.
Why not start by downloading the Booster Juice app?
It's the new way to order.
You can get delivery, skip the line in store, or choose curbside pickup at participating locations.
Don't you think smoothies just taste better when you don't have to make them yourself and clean up the mess?
Check out the secret smoothie menu in the app with rotating monthly features.
Order delivery from order.boosterjuice.com or from the Booster Juice app today.